are starting with the Indian Council Act 1909. This act is also known as Morley Minto Reform. So basically, at that time, at the time of the passing of the act, Lord Morley was the secretary of India, and Lord Minto was Viceroy of India. So this act is also known as Morley Minto Reforms. So in the previous video, we have seen the Act of 1892, in which we have seen what were the factors responsible for the putting forth the Act of 1892, and we have also seen the main provisions of the Act of 92, in which the main was expansion of legislative councils, and in the end, we have seen the defects or the limitation of the Act of 1892. So in this video, we are starting with the uh, Indian Council Act of 1909 or Parliamentary Reforms. So basically, the Indian Council Act 1909, also known as Parliamentary Reform, as I have said you the reason. So reforms was a constitutional measures of great importance. It proved to be the very grateful for the further development of the constitutions of the India. Some historians are of the view that if the installment of the reforms had come in 1905 instead of 1909, it would have been universally held as a great political concessions. Means it would have been very relieful if the act would have come before the 1905 or the 1909, because there were various calamities which have gone, various sufferings which Indians have gone with. So due to those sufferings, the benefits of the this Indian Council Act 1909 seemed to be very small. Thousands of the people who died in the plague due to diseases. So we will see further. So the event which took place between 1905 and 1909 created discontentment, means narazgi, among the Indians. So they were not satisfied with the act of 1909, though it was a step forward. So basically, it was just the introduction. Now, let's see the causes responsible for the passing of the Act of 1909 in detail. So, number one is dissatisfaction with the Act of 1892. So, the Indian Council Act of 1892 didn't satisfy the general public. So there were various limitations of the 18 Act of 1892. We have seen that budget in the defects of limited defects or limitation of the Act of 92. So here we have seen the various limitations. So due to those reasons, it was unable to satisfy the general public, and the Legislative Council established under it were two small bodies. Two means very small. It's not TWO. So it's well, the Legislative Council established under the Act of 1892 was very small. They could not claim to be the real representative body of the people, because we have seen that various small members were participated, elected. What elected was not used, nominated, uh, and out of those members, mostly the members were the previously members. So we cannot say that uh, like they were the real representative of the Indian peoples. So the right given to legislative council were also extremely limited. We have seen that they were just like the advisory members. They did not have the power to make decisions on their own. And at the end, if certain decisions in the provincial legislative councils are taken by the council members, then at the end, the governor general have the authority to amend those, or without giving any reason, they could deny that law. So basically, in the end, we have seen that British control was dominated. So in their Indian members had no share in the administration. We have seen that. Though the budgets were discussed were going, but Indians were not allowed to participate. Most of the time, non-official members were not allowed to participate, and mostly the non-official members were the, yeah. So in these councils, being landlords and native princes were given representative. We have seen in the defects of the Act of 1892, who could not claim to be the people real representative, because the people who didn't know the sufferings of the common people, how could they, how we can say that they are the real representative of the Indian peoples. So now let's move to the second region. So second region was the uncommon suffering of the Indians. So as I have said you before, Indians have gone through many sufferings, like many diseases. They were surrounded by the whirlpool of suffering. Whirlpool means you can say that circle of that disaster. So in the closing of 19th century, Indians was driven into a whirlpool of suffering. Also, plague followed by famine followed by plague, malaria, etc. Such was the story of the Indians between 1896. Means most of the people died during these periods. There were a lot of sufferings where people did not have foods to eat. So thousands of the Indians were swept up by the famine that broke out in 1896 and 1897. And according to an estimate, by the end of 1898, recorded number of death reached total of 1,73,000, which was probably considered below the real mortality rate. Means the real mortality was much more greater than this number, and it was just the numbers, the recorded number was, but the you can say that the peoples living in the far villages, in the forest areas, they were not even counted. So the member probably considered below this. So the actual was this number of count was below the real mortality. Also, the step taken by the government to meet the suffering of the people proved too inadequate. Means बहुत सीमित था, too inadequate to save the dying Indians. So the world opinion vehemently criticized the Indian government inadequate to save the dying Indians. Also, all these happenings ultimately turned the Indians against the government and paved the way for the emergence of militant nationalism. So basically, the word militant nationalism is used because we have seen because the Congress party was divided into two. Uh, uh, that one was modern and another was extreme. So extremists believe that uh, direct actions is needed to take place for if we want freedom from the Britishers. Also, third is autocratic rule of Lord Curzon. So, Lord Curzon remained the Viceroy of India from 1898 to 1905, and it was during his period that the this calamity broke out, in which thousands of the Indians were swept out, thousands and the lakh members of the Indians swept out. So, and above all that, his autocratic rule was annoying to the Indian peoples. The thing was that they were not even paying attention, and above that, they were ruling India on basis of autocratic. So basically, Lord Curzon has imperious nature, so autocratic temperament and bureaucratic attitude widened the gulf between the rule and the rulers. So it increased the gap between the Indians and the Britishers. So he had no faith in Indians. Even the Lord Curzon had directly spoke out in the public that he had no faith in the Indians, and so he imported people from England to fill up the highest rank of the civil services. Also, he enacted Indian University Act of 1905. Later, we'll discuss in detail. So, it was the act which was basically to take the you can say universities of Indians in the controls in control. So, studies were to take place based on the that of their demands. So, he enacted Indian University Act of 1904, which aimed at checking the growth of English educated class, which was getting more discontented with the government. Also, his official secret Act 1905, which was a clever device to restrict the liberties of the Indian press. So, due to this act, Official Secret Act, press would have to ask permission from the British officials to share information. So, this act was also a type of act which was forcing Indians to uh, go against, and also act was increasing this these type of acts were increasing the gap between the Indians and the Britishers. So to make the matter worse, Lord Curzon did the partition of the Bengal instead, in spite of persistent opposition. So partition of Bengal was took place in 1905, and though the most of the members not demanded so, but Lord Curzon didn't listen of the animals. In spite of the persistent opposition, he refused to undo that. Also, his stubbornness at last cost his popularity. Intelligent, yeah. So basically, intelligent, yeah, the peoples who have the knowledge of that certain fields and like politics and other. So intelligentsia developed hatred for him, Ghirna for him. They started not liking him. They started criticizing him, and even moderate leaders commended his style of governance or administration. Means his stubbornness got such much popularity that even the smaller members of smaller leaders or moderate leaders started criticizing him. So number fourth point is the influence of the foreign event. So basically, in beginning of the 20th century, there took place some very important event outside India. So these events infused nationalism among Indians, and their movement was self-governant and strong. So let's see what were those movements that inspired Indians. So number one, the victory of the Japan over the Russia in 1905. Though Japan being a small and Russia being large, Japan was able to uh, get victory over the Russia in 1905. And this was of the great significance. Also, it was popularly interpreted as the victory of Asia over Europe or of East over West. So it revived new hope among the Indians that yes, we can wins over the that of Britishers. We can at finally we can deny the rule of the Britishers. So it was felt that with the spirit of self-sacrifice and more patriotism, the Indians could get rid of their callous British master, means rigid Britishers who didn't hear of the anyone and just to do their of the mind. So basically, this victory revived the hope in the Indians. So also the defeat of the Italian by the Abbasians and the new nationalism movement in Egypt, Persia, and China also had a deep impact on the minds of the Indians. So uh, you can say that at that time foreign events also influenced in Indian nationalism and increased it to a very greater level. So for now, let's stop here. In the next video, we will discuss the fifth factor responsible for the passing of the Act of 1909, and which is humiliation of the Indians in the abroad. So for now, let's stop here. Thank you.